in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity. Tomorrow never certain. What was behind the curtain? The face of evil lurking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble from LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons will breach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. Hey, I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Getting Ish Done with Ike and Dr. Thunder. And today we're going to be talking about balance. Yes, balancing your efforts, balancing the actions that you take in between two extremes. One extreme, which is just managing things, and another, which is creating, making. And we'll get into what that means here in a second, but make sure you go ahead and click that like button, click the share button, subscribe if you've not already, hit the bell button, and all that good stuff. How's it going, Dr. Thunder?
I'm all right. In an unusual streaming location for our show today, doing some traveling, but
You're breaking up.
Am I breaking up now?
Now you're breaking up. You were good before, but then I think you started dropping off, and then you came back, and now you're breaking up a little bit.
Okay. How about now? Is it better now?
Yeah. So far, it seems
about
to be the
same.
case that you're not. No. You're not.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and get. Well.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's get into the topic, and I'll mute up so that it's not too distracting.
All good. Now, I want to go ahead and talk about the kind of balance that we're talking about here. Okay. Now, one of the most interesting series that we did was a series on the book called Getting Things Done. Okay. I'm going to drop a link to that series below and pin it to the chat so that people can go check that. It's a book called Getting Things Done, written by David. I forget his last name now. Okay. But one of the things that is mentioned, perhaps the whole point of that book, right, is that things need to be captured, meaning take these ideas that are in your head about the things you need to get done, or you need to plan a birthday party, you need to send some gift to your mom, or you need to set up this particular tax structure, or whatever it may be, and you capture it by putting it in a list, in a calendar, in a spreadsheet, in some kind of a planning tool. You capture it, you organize it, right? Break it down into chunks, right? And you make it efficient. And then you can, out of that can come out a set of tasks and action items that are related to getting what needs to be done. Now, the idea behind that, which is actually quite true, is that you take it out of your head and you put it somewhere else so that your head is now presumably free to do other things, because a lot of the stress that you're feeling about getting things done is the fact that you haven't captured it into an external system, a system that is external from you. And one of the aspects that he emphasized in that book is that when it's out of your head, you're now able to do more creative things. So the kind of balance that we're talking about today, I want to ask if it makes sense to you, Dr. Thunder, is the balance between managing, which is, just doing things, right? Filling out a spreadsheet, balancing your checkbook, versus creating, which would be something like, well, how is my business going to expand? What am I going to do to get new clients? Looking into the future, or maybe just making the craft. Maybe you're into making porcelain teacups or something like that. The aspect that we find more meaningful, right? Versus the aspect which is less meaningful, such as data entry. First of all, does that make sense to you, Dr. Thunder? And is this something that everyone has? Does everyone share this dichotomy? It's not just creative people, right? And by creative people, I'm also including the entrepreneurs. So the balancing between managing and making, does that dichotomy make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
All right. So we're gonna go ahead and share this video here by Tim Ferriss. Okay, and everybody probably knows who Tim Ferriss is. Is one of these guys that is obsessed with optimization and hacking of all kinds. You know, measuring the teaspoons of salt that goes in your food and adding sodium bicarbonate to whatever and whatever, right? You know, counting the breaths that you take every day and optimizing it. So optimize, optimize, optimize is what Tim Ferriss is all about. And he's interviewing a comic book artist. And they're going to be talking about this concept here of the balancing between making and managing. So let's get right into it.
How do you protect or create the time for creativity and making, right? So if we think about it as making versus managing, so the making is the creative stuff, the managing is all the meetings, all of the CEO stuff. I would have to imagine there have been times where you've looked at your calendar after a hard week and you're like, for fuck's sake, I've spent 90 plus, maybe 100% of my time this week managing stuff. How have you been able to block out or protect the time to create? How have you thought about that as someone who has all these different business ventures now?
It's the eternal question we all struggle with. How do we balance our life? We all ask that, both on the personal and the work. We're always going, how does this work? Through failures, Tim,
He's going a little
found
atmospheric
that I
first, it
was
seems.
a 5-ball juggler, right? And here's what that means. That I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the best juggler in Vegas and you're with Cirque du Soleil and you can juggle 25 balls. Even that person, if you go 1 ball more than they're capable of, guess what happens? All the balls fall.
What are your thoughts so far?
Yeah, he's going a little atmospheric first. And perhaps he'll get more uh, focused on the question, the specifics of the question. Again, the difference between managing and between those. But one more ball, then yes, everything does fall apart.
Got it. So the knowing how many balls you can juggle, knowing your limit would seem to be the point on this one. Now, exactly, yeah, it's not directly talking about the managing versus making, but he is talking about the juggling aspect, the doing all these many things. And knowing your limit, I guess it is important there. I'm not sure how exactly um, in our conversations, perhaps, we have kind of talked about knowing when you're hitting the wall. Perhaps our last series on sleep and rest and, taking a break will kind of come into that, so that all
Burnout.
these balls, yeah, burnout. Yeah, our series on burnout will kind of accounts for this particular aspect. We did that one on burnout. And then prior to that, it was the rest is overrated or underrated rather, right? So and those two are kind of related. So I think that these things will be part of knowing. But I think that he makes it seem easy as though we would just know how many balls you can juggle, in this. I mean, the concept is clear that, oh yeah, well, if you overstep your limit, everything will fall, presumably. But how clear are you as to what your limit is? Or is
Yeah,
for me, yeah, go ahead.
that's a lifelong journey. I don't like to use those uh, buzz atmospheric words like journey, but it is a lifelong process. Figuring that out, know thyself, all of that business. Seems like it would be something easy to do, but actually, maybe it's the most difficult thing to do.
Hmm.
So, yeah, you're not going to just know what it is. You're going to have to challenge yourself, find yourself in all kinds of bogus situations, and see if you're going to sink or swim. And, whatever does not kill you only makes you stronger, right?
Aha. So learning here being very, very important to this process of figuring it out. So I was listening to something recently where someone was talking about, well, especially if you're going to be doing something entrepreneurial, you need to remove yourself from the whole world of right versus wrong, and put yourself more in the mode of learning, which is, I'll do it, and then when it breaks, I'll know to reiterate, course correct, and learn. And those kinds of learnings, in this case, if we follow the analogy of the ball dropping and everything falls apart, those things will be deeply ingrained in you, in terms of you don't have to, you won't, if you're not asleep, you won't do it again, right? You won't, you'll know, oh my, yeah, I overstepped that line. And typically you wouldn't do
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And when you say right or wrong, just for clarity, I know that you're not talking about morality here. You're talking about the correct way to do something versus so the orthodox versus the sort of unorthodox approach, or there will be a way, or you could sort of lean into the way that you're oriented. Um, you and I are both more intuitive, right? So there's some people that would approach things that way, so we can kind of jump into stuff and kind of figure it out. Other people might actually need to have, uh, several lists of things, and everything all scoped out before they get started. Uh, so yeah,
Yeah. So the right or wrong, I think you've created some marks there with regards to that. I want to double click on that a little bit. Um, Also, there are people have this kind of a weird perfectionist mindset, um, and in that sense, right or wrong will have to be them overcoming the fact that they don't know yet, and by that I mean now the right way of setting up this business, the right way of going about getting that client, the right way of where there is a definite wrong way, right? And it's not just a question of choice.
paralysis.
Yeah, exactly. Analysis, paralysis by analysis. You know, there is a right way and there is a wrong way, definitely, of doing X, but people are afraid of doing things the wrong way. And yes, you're correct in terms of the morality thing. Um, but perhaps a conversation for another day, perhaps not even on this not this show. uh I'm going to try to crush people's notion of morality. You're right in the logic of it, that I'm not talking about morality, but I would even push some people to challenge what they think is morality when it comes to this idea of right or wrong, because a lot of that is just has to do with straitjackets that have been put on them by society, right? uh
Better to
People think
better
that
to get forgiveness than permission.
that kind of a thing. And people, for some people, saving face is a moral question, right? It's like it's like heaven or hell. Oh, but it's saving face. It's, oh, what will my people, what will my parents think, what will my friends think? All these things, they it all bleed into the same kind of moral stuff. Or, oh, um Yeah, this kind of weird obligations that people think they have, or maybe they do have, they've imposed upon themselves, imposed from the outside, and all that kind of stuff. All that stuff needs to, you need to push the snooze button on that stuff and get into, well, let me just learn. Let me learn. And then you actually have to learn, by the way. So it's not just you can't just put off this stuff and then not learn. But let us continue here.
Every ball you're juggling hits the floor, and it's a mess. And so I unfortunately let the balls drop at times that I was acutely aware that I was doing a disservice to certain areas. And I learned that I was a 5-ball juggler. And here's what that means for me. It means that I'm always constantly juggling 5 balls. But if another opportunity comes along and I get excited about it and it makes sense both from an artistic and from a business CEO level, I must put one of the 5 balls I am currently juggling down or put it in the hands of others and give them full trust to do what they need to do.
Hey, can you
before
stop
I
here?
pick up that new opportunity so that I'm
Yeah, this is a very good point. This is okay. So I'm going to give him more credit now because, like I said, it started out being a little atmospheric, but this, I think, this point that he just brought out, I think, is critical for everyone to know, and for everyone to have the ability to set a ball down. That's not an automatic, right? You have to build an infrastructure that can allow for, with the kind of people that you need, that you can trust to be able to do that, or you just can't take it on. And so building that infrastructure becomes a high priority if you want to be able to take on some of these other uh, interesting projects that arise, stuff that people ask you to do, that you really, really, really want to do. And maybe it's not even a particularly lucrative, right? But it's just something that you really want to do. You still have to be able to delegate, right? You have to be able to delegate these other sort of uh, things that have to get done. So I think that's a really, really
Yeah, that is a very good point. Um, checking for you, is that him? Yes, checking for you is on a side quest here, asking a side question, and I guess I'll answer it. He says that sole proprietor or LLC, uh, being in a business without partners. So when it comes to the structure of a business, there are two aspects. There's a legal aspect, and then there's a tax aspect, and those two things are quite separate, right? In other words, there's the way the IRS treats you, and the things that the IRS allows you to do, and the kinds of records that you have to keep with the IRS. And then there is the legal thing, which has to do with, for example, liability. So an LLC is good for liability purposes. It is good because now you have a separate EIN number, which is like you can open up a bank account. It's good because you can have you start treating your business like a business. And when you start treating your business like a business, as a matter of fact, um, it turns out that the business tends to thrive better or more, right? When you have a separate business account and you have all these other separate things, right? So that's for the legal aspect. For the tax aspect, an LLC and sole proprietorship are basically the same thing. If you're a sole proprietor versus LLC, it's all just seen as income. You still have to pay Social Security tax and Medicare tax and that 15% blah 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 taxes. So whatever deductions that the sole proprietor is allowed to take, same thing with a LLC. But so LLC is good legally, ability to have a separate business account and all these other kinds of things, great. Tax purposes, it is the same. So if you're going to be a sole proprietor, might as well get an LLC. Let us continue.
or put it in the hands of others and give them full trust to do what they need to do before I pick up that new opportunity so that I'm constantly at 5 and don't extend myself. And so it was a lesson hard learned over the years. And what that also meant was, Todd, You can't do all the artwork yourself. So you're going to have to become a good scout, and you're going to have to find
Hey,
talent.
can we stop here?
And at some point,
I'm going to ask you a question, Ike.
Mhm.
So you hear this saying frequently, experience is the best teacher. Now, first, I'm going to provide what I think about that and then ask you what you think. And of course, it will relate to what we're talking about.
Mhm.
So I don't actually think that experience is the best teacher, because what a teacher does, if you have the right teacher, not just any old teacher, but if you have the right teacher, the teacher prevents you from having to waste time, resources, uh, giving you a way to do it that will shorten your path, right? That's what a good teacher does. That's what pedagogy is about, right? Um, and but you hear people say frequently, experience is the best teacher. The problem with experience is, I would call that the simpleton's approach,
Mhm.
where you can only learn by making your own mistakes. Now, I think this can get very nuanced and very difficult on an individual basis for a teacher to fully impart everything, because we're individuals, right? But what do you think of that?
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah.
I think you've already kind of you've started out kind of laying out the table. There are at least three things I could say. One of them is a question though, which is, and you don't have to necessarily answer it, but there's a question of what people mean when they say that, right? Especially with trite comments, bromides that are out there, sayings that are out there. There's always a, well, what do people mean? And in what context are they saying it? So, insofar as they're actually saying it is indeed the best teacher, if you have teacher A versus experience, go with teacher A, or go with the experience, then yes, I completely agree with you there. The second thing that I would say is that this is a bastardization of a concept popularized by Aristotle, which basically is an argument against Plato, which basically is supposed to, which is an empiricist worldview, which says basically, no, I don't know because of pure mathematics, because of pure logic, because of pure deduction, right? I just deduct from principles and climb all the way to the good and God, right? So, which Plato seems to love doing. But no, I have to experiment, and because Aristotle was actually a biologist, that was kind of like his main thing. One of the most contributions scientifically that he made was in biology. He also did things in physics and stuff like that, but he was an empiricist, an experimentalist. So that idea of experiment, blah blah blah, you know all this in terms of what Aristotle emphasized, and then what Aristotle said was then taken into, oh, experience is the only, because Aristotle was saying, experience is the only way of getting knowledge. That's his stance. And then people just turn it into experience as the best teacher. And then there's a statistical thing, which is the third thing I'm thinking about. Now, insofar as most people are either in the whole spectrum, um, you're not, the wise is going to be a smaller percentage, and the wise being people whom learn from other people's mistakes, right? Insofar as that is the case, the statistical truth, the observational truth will be that experience is the best teacher, right? Does that make sense? That statistical part that I just mentioned last has nothing to do with giving advice to anybody. It's just a pure like, okay, observational,
Well,
statistical. Yeah.
maybe if I can pick at that a little bit, uh, experience is the most common teacher.
Yeah, I wouldn't say best is best is
Right. And I am picking at this, and I do realize that people mean different things, and I think that was a good to sort of break this down from the sort of origins, uh, you know, and just basic acquisition of knowledge and all of that. I think that's good. I do think that language matters, and the way we express things matter. It does seem that as of late, it seems to matter less, but still, I think it matters. So that's why I was picking at that. I do realize that statistically, most people are simpletons. Yeah, right. But when we given the opportunity, we should try to point that out. That celebrating being a simpleton is probably not the greatest thing. But um, but the reason I brought that up in the first place is because of this guy, what he's talking about as far as uh, his own experience, and he basically, you know, went into a china shop and broke a bunch of stuff, and then therefore he learned that he shouldn't do that, kind of a thing. And now finally he's on the outside of that, and now he's in a better place. I guess as long as he actually has learned that lesson, I'm okay with it. But it still doesn't seem like the best, most efficient. And I think it also, the point of podcasts and people sharing this kind of information is so that people actually could learn from their mistakes, right? So that's the whole point of this, even what we're talking about, so people can learn from our mistakes. That's the whole point of developing pedagogy, the acquisition of knowledge, sharing information. It's to prevent other people from having to recreate the wheel. So anyhow,
Yeah. 100%. And it harkens back to something we just talked about here on this conversation about the right and wrong versus just go learn thing. There's a very small slice of the pie where you don't have the answers and where you cannot learn from anybody. If you're going to go and start the next big company in Silicon Valley, there is no experience to learn from. Right? It hasn't been done before. The next big Silicon Valley company has not been created by definition, but it's only a tiny slice of the pie. All the things that have to do with, well, don't mess this up, don't mess that up, well, hire slow and fire fast, find the right types, all those other parts of the pie, the 99% of the pie, you can learn from other people's experience. That 1%, which is a huge 1%, I don't make it seem like, it is the main thing about, like, well, how do I become the next Mark Zuckerberg? Well, the next Mark Zuckerberg is not starting Facebook. He has to start something else. The next Larry Page is not starting Google. He has to start something else. So it's that, like, 1%, more on the making something new. That is something you cannot learn from. But that actually doesn't involve you making a lot of silly mistakes and breaking things in a bad way. It's if you do all the rest of the pie correctly. And so I'm just completely agreeing with you that you don't just go in completely foolishly and you make all the mistakes that everybody else it keeps on making when they're starting a company, but it has nothing to do with the core idea. The core idea when starting something new, going from 0 to 1, you cannot learn from anybody. So a lot of business books or a lot of books that try to tell you, oh, here's how I started PayPal, here's how I started this. It's going to be different for you, right?
hey, I'm going to use the P word.
Uh-oh.
Privilege. So I think it may be a sign of privilege for people to insist that the best teacher is experience.
Yeah,
because
some people don't have that privilege
of messing a bunch of stuff up and bouncing back and having people, safety nets and And as long as what did I say earlier? Whatever doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. That's true, but you don't actually know what's going to kill you. So, and maybe some things you can't actually recover from unless you're like Superman, and then you just know to stay away from kryptonite or something. I don't know.
Speaking of privilege, I was thinking earlier because you know this guy Sam Bankman-Fried. Um, before before the whole FTX thing collapsed, um, let's say around 2019, I saw an interview of it from him, and it's one of those interviews that kind of just stuck in my head. I kind of looked at into him a little bit, and there's a reason why it stuck in my head, and it has to do with his personality. Okay, now I think that him and I share the same personality type. Um, However, this is going somewhere. So he just blew this whole thing up and did some really silly stuff. He comes from a privileged background. He grew up in Stanford. Basically, his parents are Stanford law professors, respected ones, growing up out here in Silicon Valley and all that kind of stuff. I think that a big aspect of, I think his privilege, in a strange way, shielded him from having to learn from messing certain things up, such that now this, I'm not making any excuses for him here on the moral front, but such that he had to go mess up billions of dollars for him to. I don't think he got. I think he, number one, and he's also super smart. So he kind of skated through, and he had all this, privileged parents and all. Everything was just smooth and rosy, too smooth and rosy. And for a very risky type person that likes to take risk, I think that he should have been thrown in somewhere where he had to fend for himself. One of the places where I started learning for myself was in boarding school. So at 10 years old, went to boarding school, right? And I was there till like 17. And that, because you not only did I learn good habits of, wake up, make your bed, protect your stuff, form certain types of alliances so that, we watched Harry Potter, to those of you who are not familiar with how boarding school goes. You, especially for boys, I think it's great. Now, not all boys. If you're a boy like mine that has similar personality to mine, Sam Bankman-Fried, for example, should have been stuck in boarding school early, and he should have learned a few things, because there are areas, and you say this sometimes, like, you're not wise in every area, right? There's some areas where you're a simpleton. Some areas where you might even be foolish, right? You're making the same mistake over and over and over again, simping, right? Until you become a simpleton, and so you're hoping that you get wise at some point. Okay, so the idea is there are many areas in which, I wouldn't say many. There's some crucial areas in which I'm a simpleton, where I have to get my hand struck by that hammer, right? And I think that going to boarding school at 10 years old was a great place for me to get those licks in, get hit in the nose, literally and figuratively, so that you don't go making certain stupid mistakes later on in life with billions of dollars of other people's money. But anyways, let us continue. Shout out to Bob. And yes, go ahead and keep on clicking that like button, share the stream. The super chat is enabled, ladies and gentlemen.
You can't do all the artwork yourself. So you're going to have to become a good scout, and you're going to have to find talent. And at some point on a good day, I feel that I am Phil Jackson when he was coaching the Chicago Bulls. I think maybe not. His conversation went something like this: Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and I don't even know what the name is of the rest of you dudes. Could you guys just go over there, and your job is, could you put that ball in that bucket? Oh, by the way, if you have any questions to that in-depth analysis I just gave you, I'll be over here in my 3-piece suit with my clipboard, and you just come over and ask me a question. And Phil Jackson was smart enough to find the proper talent and put it in the proper place. So that the end of that run, not only did Michael Jordan have 6 championship rings, so did Phil. And you know how many buckets Phil made during that time? 0. He was just.
What do you think about this talent delegation? You already touched upon it before, but this is a key aspect of making sure that, if you don't like filling out that spreadsheet or balancing that checkbook, you might want to find somebody to do it for you so that you're doing some, you're doing things that are more meaningful and things that
Yeah,
you're better
yeah.
at.
Yeah. No, okay, so first I want to address what he's talking about. And he kind of clumsily said this, but basically, a reporter or an interviewer asked Phil Jackson, "What is your secret? What is your secret to winning all these games, to being such a great coach?" And um, and he said, "Really good players." Okay. Um, Now, of course, it's not just really good players. He also had to have a philosophy that best utilized those really good players, right? So got out of their way when necessary, saw the strengths and weaknesses in different players. You're not going to run plays where players that are not particularly good 3-point shooters are shooting the ball from the 3-point line. So the triangle offense, right, which provided lots of opportunities for isolation plays for Michael Jordan, who was basically unstoppable. So there's things that you can do to really facilitate and to there's ways to get in the way, and there's ways to empower. I'm sorry for using that word. Um, so, all right. So there's that. Now, wait a minute. You asked me a question. I wanted to say that first. So,
Yeah, and
re-ask me
the
the
question
question.
has to do with you just expanding upon. 'Cause you mentioned the specifics of Phil Jackson, but expanding upon this idea of delegation, which you've touched upon before,
Yeah.
so that you can do
Yeah.
what you're best at and what's meaningful to you.
Okay. So one thing that we have to realize is that at a particular level, so it's only certain people that ever get to the place where they can delegate anything at all, right? I've talked about this sort of pyramid or triangle, whatever you want to say. We're at the bottom of the triangle. That's where you have to do everything all the time. Anytime somebody asks you to do something, you don't know how you're paying your light bill. So you must say yes to everything. And then as you develop in your career, hopefully you can at least get off the floor. So you can start saying no to some things, or start becoming more focused on the areas where you're particularly you have some natural ability. Okay, stuff that seems to be more fulfilling to you. It's very few people that actually get to the top of that pyramid where they're only doing the things that they want to do. But what is necessarily, what's absolutely true is that as you go up the pyramid, you must become better and better at delegating, and necessarily better at talent scouting, as he put it. So you have to be able to recognize capabilities that people have and be willing to trust them and utilize them in those ways so that you can continue to climb the pyramid. Because you can't get to the place where all you're doing is focusing on a very, very specific thing. The world is beating your door down, to get you to do this one specific thing, unless you're willing to delegate other stuff. So you're not going to carry everything. It's a pyramid, so it means you have to simplify, right? Simple doesn't
Hmm.
mean easy, by the way, right?
um,
And it doesn't, and it also, yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna ask you a question at the end of this, kind of picking on some of the things that you said, just to double click on some of the things that you said, and then I'm gonna ask you a question. Uh, what you mentioned about Phil Jackson and his ability to find this talent and do this kind of delegation that you mentioned that he has to have a philosophy and also know when to step out of their way and such. But also, and part of that having that philosophy and knowing how to treat these people makes it such that you can inspire them, right? So the idea of being able to lead, to inspire, to delegate, and to strategize is the difference between the bottom of the pyramid and the top of the pyramid. And it is the difference between the grunt and the general, the some between the pope and a newly minted priest, for example, is that one has to be able to inspire as well, and that's the quote unquote atmospheric aspect of the atmospheric face of having all those skills, which you said, right? The delegation, knowing the right people, knowing how to treat them correctly, and all that kind of stuff. And then the question is, you guys fire people over there in universities, or no? And have you ever had to be a part of a firing of somebody?
Sure. Now, if you have tenure, then you can get reassigned, right? That's possible, but they can't really fire you unless you break federal law or you do some, you know, questionable stuff. They can
Screw the
marginalize
pooch.
you until you decide to quit. But, uh, but yeah, I mean, if you're not a tenured, uh, faculty member, then and if you're on some sort of a year-to-year kind of basis, then the decision can just get made to not invite you back. Now, ordinarily they won't want to do that because you want to try to have as much continuity as possible, and it doesn't really serve the school, and it creates a lot of stress for students to constantly have stuff changing, right? So you want to try to as long as you can. But yeah, folks can be fired. And you want to talk about in academic institutions, coaches get fired all the time. You know, they get caught doing some breaking some NCAA rules, and okay, so we got to get rid of this cat. We got to bring somebody else in. That is something that happens. Also, presidents of universities.
I believe you're breaking up there. But yeah, you're saying presidents of universities, perhaps other people in the administrative staff underneath him get fired. The reason I brought up this fire or hire thing is because we're talking about delegation, and one of the important things about delegating is to be able to bring people. It's a hire slow and fire fast, right? And then also for those whom are in a position to fire people or whom have brought people into their organization or whatever it is that they're into, there is a difficulty associated with letting people go. It's a difficult conversation to have to tell somebody. And people have come with all kinds of euphemisms for having to tell people that they suck, right? This is not a good fit. I think you'll be better off elsewhere, or whatever it is that's going on. And I've only yeah I haven't done that often, and I still haven't quite mastered the art of firing people. That's kind of why why I asked. But typically, I give people a number of chances. Uh, and this is the typical HR rule, anyways. You give the quote unquote warnings or chances, and you document them, and then you watch. But at some point, especially in periods like this when you're cutting the fat, periods like this, interest rates going up, the money pool is drying up. You're back to reality, back to basics, back to the basics of your value. You're finding places to trim the fat. You can't. This is the times when some of the fat will be this person that's not necessarily pulling their weight. This person for whom you have to spend extra amounts of time to make sure that things are clear and done right. And it's an arbitrage of something that just drags you down, your whole organization down, if you don't clip them. And especially if someone has been around for a while, it gets harder. And that's why they say do it quickly. Do it quickly, number one, because it gets harder. Do it quickly, number two, because they corrupt other people around them, right? And for other reasons as well. So that's why you want to check your microphone again, Dr. Thunder? Oh, by the way. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, let me go ahead and give a kind of quick refresher as to the video that we're reviewing here, the topic that we're talking about. We're talking about balancing your time between managing and making. Okay. So managing is doing these tasks such as, spreadsheet filling and administrative tasks, or, delegating and such and such. Making, or the creative aspect, will be, well, planning for the future of your company, planning for the future of your endeavor, whatever it may be. It may be planning for the next course you're going to take, Bob, right? Planning for what your next steps are going to be. These are things that we find more meaningful, right? And if you don't carve out enough time for you to do the things that are more meaningful, you're going to be stuck 100% doing things that suck, like data entry, right? And and so on. And one of the reasons why we got to this topic is because in the art of getting things done, and this show is all about getting ish done, right? Every Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern. In the art of getting things done, one of the things that you have to do is be able to capture the tasks that you have by using lists, by using calendars, by using spreadsheets, whatever, building systems, capture and organize them so that they're not in your brain. Because the worst place for your brain, or for things, for a list to be, is in your head, because it actually stresses you out. Now, can I get a one in the chat if that makes sense? That a list that you keep in your head, or this vague notion that, oh, I have to do this, I have to prepare for a birthday party, I have to send X, Y, and Z to my. If it's in your head, it's actually stressful. But when you've written it down somewhere, when it's in a calendar somewhere, and along with that calendar has a set of steps. In other words, the calendar has put it in a time. It says on Tuesday, okay, go to UPS, right? And once it's there, then you now know, okay, Tuesday, I'm going to UPS. I guess I have to get some boxes before I get there. It's no longer in your head anymore. But if it's just this notion of, oh, I have to deliver this thing, then you actually are stressing yourself out. So a lot of the burden that we feel when it comes to getting things done has to do with the fact that we have not captured certain things, properly organized them, right? And put them in such a way that they have bullet point tasks associated with them. Now, one of the ways in which, and I believe you're back now. You're back, Dr. Thunder?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, and one of the ways in which one can do this is, and somebody asked this question before, and I gave this answer on the fly on this show, Dr. Thunder, about, well, how do you create these lists, right? How do you create this kind of an organized, actionable list, taking a big chunk of something into an actionable list? And I came up with something, and I think that it is key. Number one is, well, what is the deliverable, right? The deliverable is package gets to mom, or sheet music gets to X, or whatever it is, or email with cost and drawing and blah goes to Y, right? That's number one thing. Want to get that deliverable, want to define it, write it down. That's the deliverable. And then number two is, what do you need, right? Because you're like, package needs to go to X. So I need to drive to UPS. Oh, crap. I do actually have to go fix the tire in the car. I haven't actually driven the car in a couple of days. Oh, that means I'm going to have to stop by at the AutoZone. Do AutoZone still exist? I haven't seen one in a long time. I have to stop by the AutoZone or whatever. I'll have to get a box. I have to do XYZ, or I gotta go get gasoline for the lawnmower. So literally writing down what you need. I need a lawnmower. I need this, and this, and from the deliverable and what I need, then comes the tasks. The tasks can just directly bleed out of that, right? Because I need X, Y, and Z in order to deliver this. Well, that means I got to go get X, Y, and Z in this particular format, in this way. And once you have that kind of thing formatted, and then it's out of your brain there. But Dr. Thunder is back from his rough patch. Um, you were in the middle of answering the question about you having to fire somebody and the emotional aspect of that. Have you actually ever directly been involved in the letting people go committee, or you guys just let HR take care of that?
Yeah, I have, but it's in the sort of circles that I'm in. The tendency is to try to allow people to sort of do it on their own terms as much as possible, right? Uh, yeah. So I'll leave it there.
All right, so let's continue. Let's continue with the comic book artist here and his Phil Jackson analogies.
And you know how many buckets Phil made during that time? 0. He was just smart enough to know to put Michael and the crew out there in the right iterations. And so there are times where you have to just go, Todd, you can't build this all yourself. There are some things that make sense for me being the lead and or even isolating myself artistically. There are plenty of other things we do, making toys, making comic book, making movies, making video games, all of it. That's a collective team. And I actually sort of enjoy being with the collective team, because if I can find my Michael Jordans and my Scottie Pippens, and I'm in a meeting and they show me their skill artistically or with ideas or how to promote or how to sell or market, whatever, in any field, in any sort of skill set, and I feel like I'm the dumbest guy in the room, those are great days for me, Tim. Because I sit there and go, oh my gosh, I wouldn't have even thought of that. I can't even do it to that skill set. Thank God they work for me, right? And I just sit there and go,
Can I say something here?
And if I really want to make it look like.
Go ahead.
So I see largely I see my job as telling people, not telling people, what do I want to say? Finding ways to say yes. So when someone comes to me and says, hey, I have this idea, I have this thing that I want to do, what I want now, maybe it means that I have to help them to develop the idea a bit, or provide some logistics or an approach to idea. And so I'm never intimidated.
You're Borgin again. Borgin and cutting in and out.
Is it better now?
Yeah, go ahead. You're never quite intimidated.
Yeah, I'm never intimidated, and I don't ever feel insecure because someone comes up with a good idea. I like that because that means I didn't have to come up with that idea, right? So, yeah, that's my sort of philosophy on this. I want other people to be really good. I try to get the best people I can get. And then I try to just stand out of their way and facilitate, and perhaps point out where, okay, you may have some issues here, you may have some issues there, but not in a way that attempts to shut down the idea. Because I think that's a mistake a lot of leaders make. It's providing too much logistics in a way that starts to make it seem stifling. Like, well, maybe I shouldn't have thought of that idea, kind of a thing.
Yeah, this is a good point. I'm gonna um, I'm gonna point out a couple of things. First of all, I'm gonna point out the Steve Jobs quote about, your job as a leader is to hire smart people so they tell you what to do or where the direction is, as opposed to hiring presumably dumb people to tell them what to do, right? And and that's an entrepreneurial thing. Like if you're gonna start something, you already know what it takes for you to start. If to the degree that there's ego games going on, okay, your ego is not at all involved with the fact that this person that you have hired or brought in is smarter than you or has better ideas than you, because you know that you're there in your position because of things that have nothing to do with quote unquote just ideas, right? The entrepreneur is more secure in his position because it's like, hey, people just think, oh, it's an idea thing. It's like, well, no, well, you go get the clients then, or you think it's an idea thing. Well, get the client to send the money to your bank account, right? Instead of my bank account. That whole point of being able to reach into the marketplace and get the money directly from the marketplace is a whole thing in and of itself. So as an entrepreneur, you want people to be quote unquote smarter than you. So that's on the Steve Jobs end. Now there tends to be the managerial class whom are not entrepreneurs, whom are kind of anti-entrepreneurial. And by the way, it's kind of let's say at Twitter, for example, all those people that are going to be fired from Twitter that really don't have anything to do with having running the business. Okay, and by running the business, I mean that are not essential to the business. Where if you bring out a blank sheet of paper, right, which Elon Musk is doing now, and say, well, what does Twitter actually need? Say, seems like we don't need like 50% of the people here. Now, in that situation where things start to metastasize, then you have the managers whom have all kinds of ways in which they can be threatened, right? So if there's a core group, the entrepreneur, let's say Elon Musk in this case, and his core group of people whom are smarter than him about Twitter, then no one is threatened. But when you start to overexpand and overextend, and you have the Department of this and the Department of Diversity over there, no shade to them, but these things tend to be fat, right? In bare bones times, the Diversity and Inclusion Department has got to go. Except if you're in universities and you have an endowment fund and all that kind of stuff where it doesn't matter, where the economy doesn't matter to you. But those kinds of things have to go.
It ain't gonna be that long.
They're never
though.
going, Dr. Thunder. You're gonna have to live with
I don't know, man, because you know what's happening, with the Supreme Court and affirmative action and everything. I don't know how much longer that stuff is going to be around.
Good point. Good point. Good point.
Yeah,
Yeah, because that affirmative action thing is specific to university admissions, and
and,
hence, yeah,
and maybe actually
yeah,
illegal.
yeah. I mean,
So
they'll have to justify. Sure, they'll try to weasel their way into calling themselves something else or whatever. But some of that fat, some of it is has to go in corporate America writ large, and in corporate America where a lot of this managerial class is taken over. And this is a thing that George Orwell wrote about, by the way, where he talks about entrepreneurial capitalism versus managerial capitalism, and it's just a natural phase of things. Um, my camera, my camera did shut off, and it's all good. Put. I'll go ahead and there you go, little avatar right there. But when it comes to plug this in, when it comes to the natural progression of capital, you're going to have the barbarian. And this is the similar story, whether it be the Genghis Khan story of the conqueror, and then 3 generations down, you have administrators. Or the same thing happens with families where you have your great grandfather who got it out of the mud, if you will, made money, and then the great grandson is walking the streets again, bare feet, right? Um, in between that, there's this administration stuff that happens where, so in this case, in capitalism, you have the entrepreneurial capitalism, the rubber baron type, okay, of whom, by the way, Elon Musk is a good example of that rubber baron type, and is also similarly vilified, where people just don't like him for whatever reason. Part of the reason they don't like him is that most people are in the managerial class. Most of the professional class are not entrepreneurs. They're just managers, and the entrepreneur is the natural enemy, okay, of the managerial class. But it's a natural phase of things, right? After the entrepreneur establishes something, then you have to have the administrators, the lawyers come in, the accountants come in, the CEOs come in. They hire a bunch of people, they create a bunch of systems. There's a whole bunch of middle management that is there, right? And these people, to the whole point of this, they are the ones that tend to feel threatened by somebody else who has a better idea or is smarter, right? And every once in a while, the thing has to be purged again, or the company rots from the inside, or the society rots from the inside as a result of this over bloating of the managerial class. And George Orwell did a pretty good job in a particular essay a long time ago, when George Orwell was still alive, kind of describing this whole thing and where it's going to go in terms of
Hey, I can't hear you. Are you still there?
yeah. So Dr. Thunder, you're still there, right?
Yeah, I'm here. Were you muted or something?
No, for some reason, the the power of my laptop wasn't plugged in. So
I see.
yeah, that's partly why the camera turned off too, and all that kind of good stuff. But uh, it's all good. I'll go ahead and re-share this um, aspect here. Yeah, but yeah, that was a good point that you brought up in terms of not being threatened, and it just reminded me of that whole plethora of stuff that I just said regarding managerial versus entrepreneurial or
Yeah,
whatever.
and I want to add something here too. Now, this is a nuance. This is kind of tricky. So, upper administration in any institution can either facilitate in sort of facilitate's not the right word. They can put policies in place or establish culture in a particular corporation or whatever in their corporation that can cause people that are the managerial types to have good reason to fear the creative ideas of people that come in after them, right? So they can do that by either not fully valuing them or rewarding them for their years of service, right? For pulling the rug out from under certain folks, replacing them with uh, younger folks, not because it's necessarily the right thing to do, but just because they have just bought into some goofy philosophy that says hey, this other company has more younger, you know, employees, so we need to have more younger employees. So hey, let's
Fresh
start.
is the word they use. You need young, fresh. What
Right,
the hell
right,
does fresh mean?
right. So they can actually do
Oh.
things that make people feel like they they have a reason to fear. I was, I like The Office, and it reminds me of when Ryan was, what was it? He was like the what was he, the COO or something? I can't remember what that position was, but he got the corporate job, and so he came in and he was just slashing stuff, right? And he didn't actually fire anybody, but he made a lot of people feel very uncomfortable about what was happening because he was like, okay, we're putting this website into place, everybody's going to get Blackberries, everybody's going to do X, Y, and Z, everybody's going to be expected to use uh,
Hmm.
what is it? What is it called? PowerPoint. Everybody needs to be able to use PowerPoint for their presentations, X, Y, and Z. And so some of the more seasoned employees started to be quite fearful because they recognized that there was a direct relationship between them being adept at those new technologies that sound like old technologies to us now, but show is a little bit dated at this point. Um, but there was a direct relationship between their age and the likelihood that they would have expertise at those newer technologies and or have uh, what is it, the mental flexibility to be able to still learn a new system within say 5 or 10 years of their retirement. you know
Hmm.
so uh, so there's a way that you can do things that can cause people to become very fearful, and then there's a way that you can sort of create uh, a sense of peace and calm. Yeah, we're going to change some things. Yeah, we're doing X, Y, and Z, but this is an opportunity. I don't want you to see this as we're going to come in and pull the rug out from under you, because all it takes is one instance where somebody gets the rug pulled out from under them, where everybody sees that, to really create a pretty strong sense of fear. So you have to be careful.
That is interesting. And checking for you is saying fresh is a euphemism for young. And I'm going to add that young is a euphemism for cheap. That's really part of what's going on when they talk about fresh.
Right.
Young,
That's
it's
right.
cheap. That's that's what they're going for there. And to dovetailing with what you just mentioned about the ways in which you can foster peace and also versus fostering some kind of a place where people feel threatened. What we recently experienced, or what we're kind of in the middle of now, in terms of some people calling people back into the office. I believe Goldman Sachs said that everybody has to come back into the office. Even Elon Musk did it too. Said, hey, all you millennials and zennials out there working remotely on Twitter, I need you guys all report back in the office and blah, 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 right? And that's kind of part of him shaking things up. But related to this is, I've done some very thorough statistical studies and I've determined that at least I think 20%, actually it's like 19.81. Okay. So it seems to be the case that there's 20% of people, or actually it's more, let's just be more honest, closer to like 10% of people that actually that perform better remotely, right? Um, then there's a middle chunk where it doesn't make a difference. Let's say it's like 60% doesn't make a difference. Okay. And then there's like 30% where it's going to be worse if they're remote, right? So 30% need to be back in the office. 60% doesn't really make a difference. Okay. But it's for this 10% that I'm talking about. That 10%, if you force them back into the office, that's when there's going to be some issues, right? Um, I haven't been in a office situation. I left the office a while ago, uh, into because I just, I didn't particularly hate it. Now I'm somebody that, for me, the office is not like even like I don't let the office bother me. In other words, I'm not going from office to office or cubicle to cubicle, or doing water cooler culture, or try going to lunch with people that I don't want to go to lunch with, or all that kind of stuff, right? So I would always just be very focused and such. But because of the commute and certain other things, I'm definitely more productive just on my own. Actually, work more hours and all those kinds of things. Now, forcing people back into the office and that 10%. Do you have any comment on that? This 10% whom are going to do better, forcing them back into the office as opposed to doing something which is unegalitarian, which I love unegalitarian stuff, which is to and in the sales world, unegalitarian stuff happens all the time. In other words, your superstar salesperson doesn't get treated the way other people get treated, right? That's just that's the name of the game. He's allowed to whatever, right? And everyone else is. So the unegalitarian stuff is you have to come up with little deals with individuals that you know are gonna. First of all, you got to know that 10% as part of your whole skill and talent, as you mentioned before, as a manager, a leader, is to know these people, right? Whom are the A players, and actually there are more A players when you're left alone, right? And then do something unegalitarian by allowing them some more free time or whatever, and making, what are your thoughts as to that?
Yeah, I think you should reward people, and one size fits all is not uh, is not usually the best way to go. I mean, in my experience, it's not. I
Hmm.
mean, if you think about, I mean, you could think about the university system, and there are just certain positions within the university and professors, uh, disciplines, uh, where the going rate is just a higher number. It's just a higher number, right? And with that being the case, you can't treat those folks the same as you treat other folks. And people always complain that the football coach gets a lot more money than an assistant professor or something in I don't know, social work or something. Um, that's always going to be the case, and it should be the case. It should be the case because of how much revenue the head coach is going to bring in, head football coach is going to bring in to the university versus how much revenue others will bring in. So you have to treat that differently, and their job description and where they have to be and travel schedule and all that kind of stuff is going to be completely different. And hey, that's what it is. I don't have an issue with that so long as it
Hmm.
makes sense and it doesn't turn into sort of I'm just
Hmm.
treating this person differently because I like them more or because
Hmm.
whatever. As long as it's based on productivity, like, well, they need this freedom because look, when they have this freedom, look at the results they produce. As long as you can show that, then no issue.
Yeah, otherwise it's hard to make happen. Well, number one, it's wrong if you're doing it from that nepotistic place where it's just, oh, this is my brother, I'm going to give him all this leeway. But you can't make that will not fly politically. Someone's going to come for your head at some point. The reason it flies in sales world is because it's directly related to a metric, which is the most important metric, which is the only thing everybody ever measures. For some reason, everybody seems to say it doesn't matter, which is money, right? It's like in the sales world, it's about the dollars. Hey, this guy brought in a 1.5 million last quarter. What did you bring in? So when you start bringing 1.5 million a quarter, then you can start asking for perks or whatever. And salespeople I find to be some of the most um, okay with unequal outcomes people out there. in a way they're kind of just these pure capitalists. You kill what you eat. I'm not going to be complaining about stuff. I like salespeople. Now they can be sleazy and all that kind of stuff, but that's part of the gig, I guess. Let's continue.
Kevin in sales.
Can't even do it to
Wow.
that skill set. Thank God they work for me, right? And I just sit there and go, And if I really want to make it look like that I'm sort of more important than I am, I'll say something like, interesting. I'll take it under advisement and get back to everybody tomorrow, right? Where inside I'm going, holy shit, this is awesome. I just hope they don't quit and start their own company and compete against me because they're super awesome. And so that's it. You have to find talent and coach them along the way. I'm just a coach. I feel like I'm a coach now.
Okay. Well, shout out to Tim Ferriss, the master optimizer out there. So with that, I'm going to do a quick recap here, and then we can kind of have our closing thoughts on this topic. I forget the name again. I'm going to find out the name for next time. Mr. David something, who wrote that book, Getting Things Done. And I think that book turned out, that series we did on that book turned out to be a very good encapsulation of a lot of the things that we talk about, whether it's, a lot of these techniques, or let me use your favorite word, hacks out there.
Oh yeah. That's. Oh, I love that word. It's my favorite.
A lot of these hacks when it comes to getting things done and optimizing and all that kind of stuff. The book really kind of captures in a way which is psychologically poignant, which is, hey, you need to capture the tasks, which is, write them down. You need to organize the tasks, meaning, take them from just vague notions into something such as what's the deliverable, and then what are the things you need and such. And then you need to streamline them so that you can execute them. And I think that an example in the show, on one of the shows that we did on that topic that I gave, was, hey, the streamlining and the executing is, okay, if you have to go to Target, and you also got to go to the laundry, and you also got to do blah, 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 and all those things are on the same road, that you're on your way to your gig on Tuesday, then do all those things on Tuesday, right? You're like, oh, now that I've captured the tasks and I've organized them, and I see that, oh, there's Target and there's laundry and they're on this street, Foothill Boulevard, and I'm going to Foothill Boulevard for my gig on Tuesday. Okay, cool. Then there's gig, Target, laundromat, right? So that's just an analogy, but there are things such as that, like whether it's a tool that you're using, and that tool, the tool can be a computer, and in front of that computer that day, I guess I can execute X, Y, and Z. If I'm going to be in front of this person this day, then I can execute these types of things, right? So capture it out of your mind. The main psychological aspect is, when you get these things out of your head is not a freaking calendar. Okay, that's not what it's there for. If it's in a calendar, you don't have to think about it, right, Dr. Thunder? You don't have to think about it. It's in a calendar. Right? When the time pops up in the calendar, I guess I know what I'm doing now. But shout out to the super chatter here. Thank you very much. Volcanus, $10. Volcanus in Uranus, the planet, that is the planet Uranus. So given that what I just said there about capturing things, one of the important aspects of capturing things is so that you can then have your mind free to do the things that you may find more meaningful, right? The planning, the growth, the ideas, the building of the pottery that you love building, whatever it is about your business that you find meaningful. Not that you can find spreadsheets meaningful. That's some people, that's their life, right? So and that's perfectly fine. And hence this idea of juggling and finding the time between the two. And I guess if I were to look at this guy, he started out talking about this juggling of the balls, knowing how many balls you can juggle. If you add one more ball, everything falls apart, right? And then we went into basically, hey, you learn from experience, but it might also help to learn from other people's experience, and learn to set things up correctly so that you don't have to go through these other mistakes that are unnecessary, unforced errors, if you will. And he eased then into the whole delegating and coaching, the delegating and coaching aspect. The top of your pyramid, or moving towards the top of your pyramid stuff, is really what his answer was as far as how to balance between making and managing. But what are your closing thoughts, sir?
Yeah, so I think a natural progression is, well, I'll tell you what my progression has been. And this seems to be pretty common amongst people that are going to rise in the ranks, as it were. You know, most of what I did early on in my career was on the creative side. Now, I still do creative projects, but as part of my sort of main source of income, most of the stuff that I do is not um, it's not creative. It's more there's a more of a management sort of component, and then I'm trying to find ways to release a lot of the management component so that I can do what the what the sort of next level is, and that's the development. That's going out and getting money, right? Because that's the sort of highest level. It's not managing logistics, um, but you must be able to manage logistics to be able to recognize in others the capability of managing logistics, right?
Hmm.
Um, so, if the person that is managing logistics is more of a day-to-day person, then the more global person is the person that is developing relationships, networks, and asking people for money. And it's funny because uh, I don't know that that has ever really been something that I wanted to do is ask people for money, but I also realized that that is that's what the natural progression is. The people that are at the top are the ones that are best able to motivate others and to beg for money.
Yeah, the money that shows up in your bank account, somebody asked for it, right?
That's
Right.
right.
So someone asked for that endowment fund. Someone is lunching and or dinnering some people somewhere, and keeping the hedge funds happy that are investing in it. Whatever it may be. Um, yes, it is. And for me, it's not something that I ever thought that I wanted to do per se. Um, but even though when I think back in my boarding school years, one of the things that I did was to sell contraband. Meaning things you're not allowed to have in school. It doesn't have to be bad things. It's just a
Yeah,
lot of things
yeah,
you're not.
we know what contraband is, man. We know what contraband is.
I'm not. I'm not saying I was a drug dealer.
We're not
Even
we're
though,
not that lame. We're not that lame.
even though in college I did grow. I did have a nice little grow operation. Um, but anyways, another story, another day.
I
But
think that I think the what is it? The statute of limitations is expired on that, so you're
yeah,
okay.
it's expired on that, and it's illegal all over the place now. So it's all good. It's all good. But with the benefit of hindsight, I kind of see that I always was into starting stuff and selling it. I just didn't think of myself as a an entrepreneur type, and that generally is because I don't think of myself as any kind of type, anyways. Right? I just you just find yourself in places, right? Because you're intuitively just kind of moving through, right? But with the whole selling thing is an interesting thing because there are many ways to approach it. Um, one of the things that because one of the reasons why I actually didn't think I was that is because of the whole introvert stuff, meaning not necessarily the type to get a lot of energy, meaning, or let's just say meaning out of interacting with people a lot, right? Interacting with just with the common folk out there, just having just being the gregarious, just enjoying that. No, it's taxing, it's draining, it's crazy. So why the hell would I think of myself as a salesperson? But there are ways of still selling while doing that. You have to become more of a tactician. You're very technical with the way you do it. You are more of a sniper. And also, you're going to realize that even in sales, it takes a team, right? So that you have the prospector types whom are more the relationship types. They keep relationships going, the things on the top of the funnel. No one, they haven't really bought stuff yet, but these are the people who keep relationships going. And then as things start coming down, you are the type, for me, I'm the type, for example, that's able to intuit the person's need, know what this person needs as a result of my expertise in the field and all that kind of stuff, and really be able to do the verbal and psychological dance with them to getting them to close. So, and that's a very technical thing. It has nothing to do with me liking to be in that room with you at the time or any of that. So, the delegation thing even still comes in. Use your resources. Know what aspect of this sales thing or getting money out of people thing that you're good at. Because not everybody's equally. I'm thinking of this guy, Brian Berasini. Is a Italian guy with a ponytail, lives in San Francisco, one of the top sales guys at Hilti, North America. Okay, if you know what that is, we don't have to know what it is. You just have to know that there's this guy living in San Francisco with a with a gray hair ponytail, top sales guy, makes good money, and he's a super introverted guy. If you saw him, you would not think, "Oh, this is the top sales guy." He's also a sniper type. There are a lot of so personality wise or style wise, there are many different kinds. He knows how to use those top of the funnel people, keep relationships going. He also keeps his particular relationships going and his particular targets, but he doesn't spend a lot of time doing what I've recently started calling face logic. Some people just think that the way things get done is I go put my face in front of other people's faces. And for some people, that's all they have, and that's fine, and they can operate well in that space. Bill Clinton being the quintessential or best example of that. Bill Clinton was great at Bill Clinton. That is his thing. He needs to show up there and do that kind of stuff. For other people, these are the people whom delivered, like the sniper type I'm talking about. They know how to deliver at a very high level and then ask for referrals. They know how to spot good targets such that people come back to them. So the reason Brian Berasini sells all that stuff is people pick up the phone and call Brian Berasini and say, "Hey, take my money." Okay. Why? Because you're known in this area for having executed at a high level. You saved my buddy hundreds of thousands of dollars on the past project that he worked on. And he recommended me or you to me, blah, blah, blah. Oh, all that kind of stuff. I'm going on and on about this, but it's a whole thing, sales, that is something that I haven't done content on it in a while, but it's a huge kind of interest of mine these days, especially when I started unearthing it and breaking it down myself and seeing what is really inside this thing, as opposed to just, oh, you got to be a used car salesman type stuff. But anyways, Dr. Thunder, you, I believe, what today is Wednesday. That means, oh yeah, you did the different kind of thunder thoughts. So what is you guys doing two lames react this week?
Yeah, two dads. I think we are. We should be tomorrow. Either way, there'll be something happening at 10 p.m. It's probably going to be two dads react. So
All right, all
we'll
right, all right.
keep that going. And I've been doing since the first. I've been doing these shorts. Um, I've kind of started the shorts thing, and remember, I'm migrating my all the music content over to another channel. That's going to start happening slowly but surely, and I'm hoping that within the next couple of months I'll have that migration complete. Um, but yeah, all kinds of stuff going on. I just started a new TikTok, Dr. Thunder Convo, where I'm putting more kind of conversational stuff, uh, you know, commentary, social commentary, right? It's more that kind of stuff. So, yeah, that's what's happening.
Indeed, musician, professor, social commentator. Ladies and gentlemen, until next time, okay? And by the way, Case Close is happening on Sunday, right? And that is 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Believe it'll be on my channel this time. We'll be talking about something topical. Don't know yet, but stuff is always going on. All kinds of interesting things going on as we move into 2023. And back here next week, Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We're getting ish done as usual. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have to say peace, adieu, wiedersehen, arrivederci, all that good stuff.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what was behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make me get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make me get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.